Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Liberal Democrat leader Jo Swinson says her party would not go into coalition with Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn. Speaking in Bournemouth, where the LibDems are holding their annual conference, she also denies that her party is being anti-democratic in saying it would cancel Brexit by revoking Article 50 without another referendum. Our chief political correspondent Vicky Young sent this report, which contains some flash photography.
Liberal Democrat conference isn't everyone's idea of fun.
Well, it's a real pleasure.
But this year some new recruits are throwing themselves into the whole experience.
Okay. Smile, but you look a bit...
6 former Labour and Conservative MPs have defected to the Lib Dems because of Brexit.
It's a breath of fresh air.
And there might be more to come. After some difficult times, activists are feeling optimistic. Yesterday the party agreed to revoke Article 50, cancelling Brexit altogether if it wins a general election. Leader Jo Swinson denies she's ignoring the referendum result.
I think that it's about being straightforward and honest. I totally accept that lots of people won't agree with it, but I do think you have to stand up for what you think is right.
Do you spend much time talking to people who voted for Brexit, or are you not just in a Remain bubble?
Well, I get out and about and speak to people on the doorsteps, campaigning around the country, which I've done through the local elections, through the European elections.
Do you hear their anger? They're angry, a lot of them.
Well, I do, and I have those conversations.
There's a democratic issue here, isn't there? And you are being anti-democratic.
Well, I don't accept that because we have a parliamentary democracy. There was a referendum, people voted to leave, and the government's gone away to negotiate that, and a deal was put before Parliament. Parliament rejected that, including, by the way, many MPs who voted to leave.
The Lib Dems want voters to be in no doubt that they're against Brexit, but some think the new policy shift could harm the party's chances in its former stronghold.
I fear that actually taking the extremist position of going for revoke of Article 50 actually is counterproductive if we're trying to keep some of our, leave inclined or leave, having voted leave supporters in many constituencies, including in places like Cornwall and the southwest of England. If we're going to keep them on board, it's going to be much more difficult for us.
But Jo Swinson is focused on victory. She says in such volatile political times anything could happen, and she's aiming to be Prime Minister. She rejects any suggestion that she'd prop up another party.
I'm not going to support Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister because they're not up to the job. Our country deserves better. And in an election campaign, the country will have the chance to choose a better future.
So if we got to the stage of another hung parliament, you would not support either of them to be Prime Minister?
Absolutely. They're not up to it.
The Lib Dem strategy depends on the next election being all about Brexit. As Boris Johnson tries to attract Brexiteers, Jo Swinson will be going all out to appeal to those who voted Remain. She's certainly aiming high, but there aren't many people who think she'll be the next Prime Minister.
She has come up with a bold plan, but no one can be sure whether it'll get them to their preferred destination. Vicky Young, BBC News, Bournemouth.
Fatima.
Thanks, John. Now, after getting her party's support for a pledge to cancel Brexit altogether, the Lib Dem leader Jo Swinson has declared she wouldn't enter into a coalition with Labour or the Conservatives if there was a hung parliament after a general election. She says neither Boris Johnson nor Jeremy Corbyn are fit for the top job. Well, our political editor Gary Gibbon is at the Lib Dem conference in Bournemouth. Gary, what have you been hearing today?
Well, while Boris Johnson believes the future of the Conservative Party is dependent on delivering Brexit, here they think the future of their party is dependent on owning the Remain brand. And what the big event that has happened here in terms of policy initiative is that Jo Swinson, as the new leader, has doubled down on policy on Remain and said that this is now the party of Revoke. If the Lib Dems were to win a general election, that's what they would do. They think that is the way to grow their vote. It looks, when you talk to Lib Dem strategists, as though there are signs that it is growing in certain areas, but maybe coming down a bit in other areas because of this approach. Rural areas maybe suffering a bit, not advancing, whereas there could be some advance in some metropolitan, some urban areas. You're also hearing here, talking to strategists, that there's a concern that maybe they're putting all their eggs in one basket. A huge chunk of the membership have joined since Brexit. Is there a danger it becomes a single issue party? Is there a danger that if Brexit were to happen, the bubble that they're enjoying at the moment might just burst? But for the moment, the party is totally focused on trying to stop Brexit happening, and also entertaining the new arrivals that have come from other political parties. There's some flash photography in the report that follows.
The man who led the way, the first of those MPs to cross the floor to join our party this summer. Conference, please welcome Chuka Umunna.
The Liberal Democrats gave a prime speaking spot for the first in the recent wave of defectors.
Now, I've been to a few parties, and I hope you don't mind me saying this and sounding immodest to say that when I made the decision to join this party, given my experience so far, this has been one of the best political decisions I've ever made since going into politics.
He was embraced by leaders present and past. Paddy Ashdown's widow said he'd be proud.
Well, he is an inspiration.
Rarely can a political switcher have been absorbed and promoted so fast.
Well, you'd have the yellow, haven't you?
Absolutely. Being on message.
Got the family colours.
Some Lib Dems wanted assurances that the new arrivals had been properly checked out.
Warm welcome from everyone, or some people sizing you up and just trying to work out whether you're a true believer?
Well, I'm sure that they may be, but all I've had, to be honest, is a very, very warm welcome.
The Chief Whip's tried to reassure Lib Dems that he interviews all potential defectors before they're allowed to join up.
As Chief Whip, of course, it's up to me to make sure that it's done properly and professionally.
You'd take anyone, wouldn't you?
We have conversations with lots of people that go nowhere.
One of the new arrivals had 2 meetings today with Lib Dem activists unhappy that he had abstained in the Commons vote on same-sex marriage and had supported HIV checks on those settling in the UK.
So do you think you've calmed people down on both these issues, whether people with HIV should come to the country and gay marriage?
I think that this is going to be an ongoing conversation because of, unfortunately, the way in which it's been stirred up by, interestingly, the extreme left and the extreme right.
The party's new leader won conference backing yesterday for her first big policy move.
Getting in the car.
Jo Swinson committed the Lib Dems to revoking or abandoning Brexit altogether if the party wins the next general election.
Oh yeah, look, yeah, it works.
I feel we are opening ourselves up to similar accusations that we've been making against other people.
You look like the Brexit party of the middle ground, suddenly.
Well, yes, quite, exactly.
The Lib Dems' anti-Brexit branding is boosting support. Some wonder if the party risks becoming a single-issue campaign that would be at great risk if Brexit happened sometime soon.
If it happened, couldn't the bubble burst quite quickly?
I've thought about that, and I thought about whether a bubble burst could happen in the short term, and it could do to some extent.
Thank you. Great stuff.
Tomorrow, Jo Swinson will tell the party faithful she's ready for number 10. Even in these turbulent times, a bold line for a Lib Dem leader to deliver.
Well, earlier I spoke to Jo Swinson and asked her about that big policy initiative of the week. If the Lib Dems win a general election, they would revoke Article 50 and effectively rip up the result of the referendum. You said if we want to be a party of government, we need to speak to the whole country, no matter how people voted 3 years ago. You've given up on that?
Not at all. I think we do need to speak to the whole country. There is a whole host of problems that our country is facing where we have strong solutions to deal with them.
How do you get a hearing from Leave voters if you say you're ready to bin their vote?
We're being straightforward about what we think is the best future for our country. I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that the Liberal Democrats want to stop Brexit. We've been saying it very clearly for months.
And that's not very liberal, some people in this party feel.
I think it's about giving people a choice and about saying, if you think that this Brexit is, costing more than you thought it would and taking longer than you were told it would, and actually looks quite different to what was put to you back in 2016, then you've got the chance to stop it. Liberal Democrats will, if elected as a majority government, revoke Article 50.
You're not a big fan. You're an avowed critic of our electoral system. You could.
A
party can come to power with a puny percentage of the vote and overturn 52% who voted for leave. Where's the justice in that?
Of course, I want to. Of course, I want to change our electoral system, and I will continue arguing to change our electoral system.
You quite happily use it as a weapon to beat these leavers over the head if you happen to win.
It is the system that we have. And if the Liberal Democrats win a majority under this system, then I think that will be a pretty clear mandate for us to stop Brexit.
It's a dodgy mandate according to the Liberal Democrats' creed, which is that this is a busted flush of a system. But you'd be using it. It doesn't seem very liberal.
Look, if we end up with an election being the only way that people can have their say, then of course we need to make sure there is a clear choice for people at that election.
A couple of quotes have popped up in the last 24 hours. We heard Sir Norman Lamb this morning talking about how he was worried that it was polarisation and you're playing with fire. Jo Cox's partner, widower, said that it was polarisation. You can't overturn a majority in the referendum with a vote in a general election. Does it not worry you, these voices being raised against this idea?
I appreciate that not everybody agrees with it, and we had a debate in our conference hall,
But
which
they're saying
was
it's
a lively
extremist
debate.
and it's divisive.
I think it's being clear and honest about where we stand, and I think it is about giving people that choice. It is our duty to make sure that they have the chance in a general election to choose to stop Brexit.
Isn't the truth here you're a bit worried that Labour, who've been on a bit of a journey, might just travel a bit more on that journey towards Remain? You won't have exclusive political terrain all to yourself, so you've just decided to outflank them and damn the principles.
I am not worried about Labour, because Labour have been all over the place and continue to be all over the place. The only reason I'm worried about Labour is because they have been failing our country in the way in which they have vacated the space, totally failing in their duty as the official opposition.
Some people actually think that there were some priorities that made them vote leave that weren't just to do with the things you're talking about, the trade figures, maybe even the national income. They actually made a choice for different reasons. You're telling them not just that you're going to bin that, but that they made it for the wrong reasons and you know better.
People, of course, voted on both sides of the referendum in 2016 for a whole host of different factors. And like any vote, there's a complex series of factors involved. But I do believe in our future in the European Union. I recognise that there are other people who take a genuinely held different approach, and I respect that. But I want to give people the choice.
They might be scratching their heads feeling you don't respect it at all.
I don't agree with it, but I recognise their strength of feeling.
Some people have been scratching their heads trying to work out how the Tory party, all these people who supported Tory austerity measures and the rest of it, is now saying, let's turn the taps on, don't need austerity anymore. Are you in the same position as them? They haven't apologised for austerity. They haven't said it was wrong. Was it wrong? Are you going to apologise for it? Is it just switch the taps on and pretend it didn't happen?
Well, I mean, I think the problems with the Conservatives' current plans is there's no detail about how they're going to pay for them, and they're, suggesting they're going to have a magic money tree.
So you think austerity should carry on?
No. Well, what I'm saying, sometimes it's about making tough choices and about recognising where you need to make taxation decisions as well as spending decisions. And we will be straightforward and set out our plans at the forthcoming election whenever it is upon us. But I have been clear that there's things that we shouldn't have allowed through in the coalition government, and I think we have to learn from that experience and act differently in the future on particular issues. The bedroom tax would be a good example where I've already said I don't think we should let that through, and we've learned from that experience.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
To talk of an election back here now, and the new policy of the Liberal Democrats to scrap Brexit without a second referendum if they were to form the next government. Their leader, Jo Swinson, insisted to Robert Peston today that did not make them a single-issue party.
Jo Swinson's first party conference as Lib Dem leader. Her party's surging in the polls, gaining new MPs as disillusioned Labour and Tory MPs choose to join her, and taking a huge risk by committing her party to ignore the referendum result and simply keep the UK in the EU. Nigel Farage has the Brexit Party. Are you now leading the anti-Brexit Party?
Well, I think anyone paying attention to politics does understand the Liberal Democrats are wanting to stop Brexit. It was emblazoned on the front.
But are you a single issue as Farage's party?
We're not a single issue party. We are a party with more than a century of liberal heritage, and we want to create an open, fair and inclusive society.
Even though the vote to leave was 52 to 48, in terms of constituencies, almost 7 constituencies voted to leave compared to 4 that voted to remain. Doesn't your strategy mean that you are giving up any hope of being the majority party?
No, I don't agree that that's the case, but in any event, our position is based on what we think is right. It's based on our values and on our principles, and putting that forward. You can do politics by focus group and, you know, intricate polling and so on, but in reality, I think people want to know what you stand for. We are seeing people coming to us from both Labour and the Conservative
Well, you
parties.
are getting disillusioned MPs from both parties joining
many
you.
members, councillors.
Any more to come?
Well, my door is always open to those who share our values. And
any more conversations since Sanjima joined you?
Absolutely having conversations, and you know, of course, you'll appreciate those remain private.
Any chance you'll announce anybody else tomorrow?
Look, some of these things take time. The Conservatives are increasingly, you know, chasing after a party in the image of Nigel Farage, and the Labour Party is headed off to the far left. Our country does deserve better.
Now, some might accuse the Prime Minister of trivialising politics by saying he's the Incredible Hulk, but if you had to choose a superhero, who would you be?
Well, you know, I think, yeah, it's hard to beat Wonder Woman, isn't it?
Well, Jo Swinson will need more than Wonder Woman's powers to win the election, even though Brexit is blowing up everything we thought we knew about politics. Robert Peston for News at 10 at the Lib Dem conference in Bournemouth.
Are the Lib Dems playing with fire in their new Brexit positioning? The parties used the conference in Bournemouth to explain it would call first for a second referendum and then become the party of Revoke in any general election campaign. They'd cancel Brexit if voted into government. But it was one of their own, former Health Secretary Norman Lamb, who told them they were playing with fire, breaking the nation's social contract, he said, if Leave voters felt cast aside. And the leader of the Greens, who has worked closely with the Lib Dems to stop no deal, joined his criticism. You can't pretend the result didn't happen, Caroline Lucas tweeted today. This doesn't strengthen our democracy, it further imperils it. I caught up with Ed Davey, their deputy leader, and asked him whether it was really democratic to simply revoke Article 50.
We want a referendum. I don't think people can object to that as a democratic way forward. And frankly, if the Liberal Democrats got a majority at the next election, going from the 12 seats we won in 2017 to over 326, that would be a startling democratic mandate to take the action that, and put forward the policies that we'd have stood on at that general election to stop Brexit. We would have the democratic mandate.
This sounds like arrogance even to some of your friends, even to those you've worked closely with to stop no deal. Caroline Lucas was saying you can't pretend the result didn't happen. This doesn't strengthen our democracy, it further imperils it. You're picking the wrong side here.
No, listen, we absolutely know the vote happened. We've just gone through 3 years of chaos, political and economic chaos, and if we go down the route of no deal, or indeed a hard Brexit, there's going to be more chaos. What we're saying is it has to have a democratic exercise. We prefer a people's vote, as I believe Caroline Lucas supports, but if that is not available, and the election is the effectively quasi-referendum, that is the moment to be clear and say to the British people what you will do and how you will do it.
You are giving Labour the most amazing opportunity here. They sound like the reasonable ones. They're the ones saying we'll give power back to the people. You're the school teachers telling 17 million people they are wrong.
Well, I'm sorry, that's a wrong analysis, because we are saying it should be done in an election.
Let's imagine that you get into power, that you get these, 300 plus seats, it's miraculous. You revoke Article 50. What do you imagine that half the country does then? Do you think they'd go, that's fine, we'll go quietly, or do you think they might riot on the streets because they've just been overturned?
No, there would have been an election, and people respect that election. They can fight another general election at another stage in 4 or 5 years' time after that.
But this is straight out of the Boris Johnson.
But we'd have had democratic legitimacy.
This is the Brexit Party playbook. It's like the people who lost get nothing, or the people who lost are overturned and they don't even get a voice. Are you, the Lib Dems, really prepared to say to half the country, they're wrong, you get nothing?
Well, listen, we either Brexit or we don't. And there is a division in the country, and we recognise that. And in my speech to the Liberal Democrat conference today, I talked about the need, when we are in government, to reach out to Leave communities and Leave voters, people often who voted because they feel they've been forgotten. They feel they've been left behind. They feel that London didn't care.
This doesn't sound like reaching out. This sounds like ignoring. It's exactly what the Brexit Party would do to Remainers if they got into power.
No, because actually what we want to do, and I don't believe Brexit Party have ever said this, we would want to make our first spending priority, our top spending priority, reaching out to those areas that have not enjoyed the prosperity of recent years.
Every party has said
that. Are more unequal.
Let's come back to this idea that perhaps you don't win a general election, perhaps it's a hung parliament, the Lib Dems are kingmakers. You've made it very clear you won't work with Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson. Could you work with John McDonnell, or could you work with Michael Gove?
Well, I mean, they have some characteristics of their current bosses, so that doesn't make them terribly attractive, I'll be honest.
Is that a no?
But let's remember, it's a no. Let's imagine the type of parliament you're describing. Liberal Democrats would have a large number of MPs in that, and we would have real influence. And a government would either be formed that's a minority government, more likely a Tory minority government probably on the numbers than a Labour minority government, and we'd have to vote on all the different issues they put forward. And I think actually that might lead not to that Tory minority government lasting very long. I think we might well see the emergence of a national unity government, which I've argued for some time.
You've said that we may see other defections to your party, not this week, but in the future. What are we looking at then? Would you say a handful, 5, 10? How many people are you personally in talks with tonight?
I'm not personally in talks with anyone, but some of my party colleagues are, who've got that responsibility. There's been a number of people, I don't have the absolute number, that's just the honest truth, I don't know that number, but I've been surprised how, in the corridors of Westminster, how pleasant and lovely some Labour and Tory MPs are being to me. People are often very polite, of course, in the House of Commons, you'd expect that, but I'm getting a warmer welcome from some people in the tea room, shall we say?
Davey, thank you very much.